Federal Employee Notice. We have been occupied by our own military since April of 1863. Instead of doing the honest thing and fully informing their employers, the officers of the Union Army decided to go into business for themselves and to continue their mercenary operations on our shores and elsewhere. They used a species of Admiralty Law which allowed them to hypothecate debt against our assets and to presume salvage rights, in exchange for their unauthorized and unwanted and unneeded services, to fund their operations, and the British Parliament aided and abetted this every step of the way. See there, British Parliament, Naval Agency and Distributions Act of 1864 to get a taste of how HRM's government worked to undermine and commandeer our government and steal our assets, and how the British Territorial Office of United States Secretary of State was used to commit heinous crimes against the American general public. Our worst enemies have appeared, to the rest of the world, to be our best friends. The U.S. Army meanwhile morphed into the Territorial Department of Defense and then later additionally spawned the municipal umbrella corporation everyone knows as the DoD, operated by the Pentagon. This foreign commercial corporation now owns, literally, the Territorial Congress, the Secretary of the Treasury, the CIA, DHS, FBI, SEC, the preponderance of the state and local courts, which are all operated within unauthorized military districts, overlaying our states of the Union, the DOJ, the U.S. Treasury, and virtually every other apparatus of government in this country. And it's all illegal as a $3 bill. While presenting itself as the honorable soldiery of our nation, these treasonous bastards have in fact been operating as mercenary forces for hire ever since the 1860s, all without telling anyone, of course. While hypothecating debt against our assets at home via unnecessary and unwanted, salvage operations, they've self-generated more than 250 armed mercenary conflicts in which they have waged war for profit using American assets, our lives and natural resources, to attack and pillage other nations that posed no harm or threat to us. They made a mockery out of the word defense, and the only authorization, mission, or contract they ever had was to defend this country from attack. Throughout all of this, they have used a process of establishing territorial custody, that is, armed occupation by British Territorial United States mercenary forces, under the false presumption that either the civilian government was in disarray and under reconstruction, the excuse they used for their actions here in the States, or that no civilian government existed, which is what they did in Australia and elsewhere once the nasty old colonial Commonwealth system was supposed to be dissolved, but never really was, thanks to them. Now, it's all coming home to roost, flat on the Pope, King, Charles, the Lord Mayor of the inner city of London, and most of all, the DoD, Inc. The world can now see just what lousy, dishonest, self-serving, dishonorable, violent, greedy, and criminal elements have infested the British Privy Council and Parliament, and foisted themselves off as our presidents and members of our Congress. The important take-home point is that they never really were acting in our public offices and were never any sort of honorable national soldiery at any point from 1860 onward. The DoD, Inc. is a rogue municipal corporation, pure and simple. It's owned and controlled by the Pope and the Roman Curia, and it's their responsibility under ecclesiastical law to liquidate it, permanently, for cause. The cause is innumerable unlawful acts of fraud, violence, pillaging, privateering, inland piracy, armed racketeering, impersonation, barratry, conspiracy against our government and our constitutions, human trafficking, political misrepresentation, malfeasance, war profiteering, illegal hypothecation of debt for non-consensual services, phony salvage claims in admiralty venues, false claims of custodial interest, promotion of unauthorized military districts and military district courts functioning as clandestine for-profit private bill collection agencies, fraudulent misrepresentation of private corporation elections as public elections, theft and commandeering of American assets under color of law, extortion, direct illegal occupation of our states of the Union and over 24 other sovereign nations, including Japan and most of Western Europe and the former Commonwealth nations. This foreign commercial corporation in the business of providing mercenary services for hire is what we have had squatting in Washington, D.C., stealing us blind and pretending to protect us as our Department of Defense, DoD. It is totally responsible for the illegal proliferation of bioweapons and their deployment against innocent civilian populations worldwide, the illegal and unlawful and unauthorized opening of our southern border, the unauthorized North American Union, and an endless litany of evil, foreign, un-American, and unlawful activities designed to pillage our states and our people. At no time has the municipal government had any authority to do any of this under any constitution or service contract or treaty allowing its existence. The intent of the provisions allowing a plenary oligarchy to exist in the municipality of Washington, D.C., was clearly stated and debated in public. There can be no doubt that the members of any Congress, acting as the government of the municipality of Washington, D.C., are obligated to provide a neutral meeting space for the conduct of business, no more, no less, and while they were afforded a great deal of latitude in the accomplishment of this duty, it is nonetheless less a duty and not a privilege or prerogative allowing them to establish an independent, international city-state on our shores and use it to wage war and cause trouble for their employers. No such independent, international city-state was ever authorized by the states and people of this country, and no contract allowing its existence on our shores exists. Instead, the members of the Territorial Congress have largely overstepped any authority ever granted to them, and the use permits allowing the existence of the District of Columbia and the municipality of Washington, D.C., have both been violated. Whereupon we are calling for the absorption of the District of Columbia and the municipality of Washington, D.C., back into the states of the Union from which they were set aside and permitted to exist. Such provisions for a federal government, which continue to exist, can be provided by our unincorporated Federation of States, directly, as it was from 1776 to 1781. No custodial interest by any territorial entity, much less any municipal entity, can be justified under the present scenario. If the principals responsible for the existence and operations of these governmental services corporations cannot operate them peacefully and honestly and within the confines of the stipulations originally granted, then they all need to clear off our shores and consider themselves what they are: foreigners engaged in illegal commercial activities, subject to immediate arrest, deportation, and deprivation of any property rights or service contracts. The Residence Act of 1790 is subject to immediate repeal. The January 6 prosecutions, aka witch hunts, are illegal, immoral, and unlawful and must be brought to an immediate and voluntary halt. The prisoners must be released, and all untoward and hostile activities hosted by the DoD and its adjuncts, including the DOJ, must cease and desist. Unlike the looters and destroyers of the 2020 riots who have yet to be addressed for their crimes against this country, the January 6 protesters destroyed nothing and had every right to be present in their federal capital. Release those political prisoners immediately. We have no interest in the politics of our employees and could give a fig about Donald Trump or Joseph R. Biden, both of which are treading very thin ice. But we do care about the rightful functioning of our subcontractors and the proper use of our assets for their appointed and proper purposes. Any federal employee, including any general or admiral working for DoD, INC, who doubts who is boss around here needs to get an earful. Any eyeful, right about now. The states of the Union are in session. We wish for the FBI agents and Capitol Police who infiltrated the crowd and encouraged the so-called Capitol breach to be arrested and prosecuted for entrapment and for inciting a riot that would otherwise not exist. It's the members of the Territorial Congress owned by the DoD, INC, that have no right to sit in those chairs under false pretenses, and no right to attack, prosecute, or inflict any deprivation of rights under color of law against any American using private police powers that don't exist and which were never granted to them. The intent of the existence of the District of Columbia and the municipal government within it is to provide a seat for our federal government operations that is neutral and readily available to the subcontractors and to the foreign governments of the states alike. It is not to create a separate country within a country within a country, all run by commercial corporations that have no right to do any of this. We deny any claim made by anyone anywhere that our states provided more than a use permit with clear stipulations as regards both the District of Columbia and the municipality of Washington, D.C. If the denizens thereof think that they are in a position to prosecute and deny the contractual guarantees owed to their employers, it's time for them all to vacate and consider themselves unemployed. This is being plainly stated before our federal employees and the governments of the world and all the commercial corporations that are subject to our liquidation demands. No commercial corporation including the DoD, INC, has any standing to misaddress the American states and people, to impose any condition of war upon us, to presume against their employers in any way, or to assume any custodial interest related to us and our operations not specifically granted in writing. This means, among other things, that no, we don't have to register our private cars and trucks to please anyone or provide collateral for government operations. We don't have to apply for any driver license or marriage license or medical license to enjoy our freedom to travel, to establish family relationships, and ply our professions on our own soil, and anyone who thinks otherwise is due for a pink slip. These matters have already been decided by the United States Supreme Court, and there is no other interpretation or discretionary power available to the DoD, INC, or any of its subsidiary organizations, including the FBI, INC, otherwise. To all former U.S. veterans and members of the DoD, INC, including the members of the Territorial Congress, if you can't do your jobs and do them honorably, go home and stay there. We note that the FBI, which is just another private commercial corporation hiding under the DoD, INC umbrella, is hounding people in Montana for not registering their private cars and not accepting driver licenses. And stupid men hired by private corporations as sheriffs, when they are not actually sheriffs at all, are preparing to assault these Americans. Note that you, federal employees and federally connected employees, to all corporate franchises of the DoD, INC, have no power granted to any of you to comment on our private property assets, much less presume to enforce the rules of your commercial corporations on people who are not your employees or dependents within the borders of our states. You need to keep your noses clean and do your actual jobs, or we will liquidate every single commercial corporation operating under the DoD, INC umbrella, and send all of you home, not eligible for rehire. Also note that all questions related to driver licensing were resolved in the favor of the people of this country by the United States Supreme Court over 100 years ago, and nothing has changed. It's not your business, not your cars, and not your right to say or do anything about our private use of public roads and other facilities that we own and that we paid for. Period. Is that clear enough for all would-be petty despots in the employment of a foreign commercial corporation, DBA, Department of Defense? DoD, INC. As the owner-operator of the DOJ and the FBI needs to properly instruct these franchises and their operators, including the territorial state governors and members of the Territorial Congress, regarding the rights and prerogatives of the American states and people. That is the very least that it can do while awaiting its well-deserved liquidation. We are not putting up with any more stretching of the meaning and intent of the Interstate Commerce Clause, no more forced registrations of anyone or anything, no more unauthorized operation of the municipality of Washington, D.C., as an independent, international city-state, no more deprivation of rights under color of law, no more phony corporation elections substituted for public elections, no more illegal foreign territorial military occupation by our own employees, no more false claims of phony commercial wars against this, that, and the other thing on our soil, no more exercise of merely presumed to exist discretionary powers or emergency powers, and no presumed to exist custodial interest in us, our states, and our assets. It's over. The great fraud is done for. We claim all assets of the offending corporations and demand their immediate liquidation in our favor as the priority creditors and primary secured parties since 1776. This is being addressed directly to the principals responsible via the Vatican Chancery Court. This notice is also being provided to all territorial and municipal employees and members of their state-of-state governmental services corporations by Anna Maria Riesinger, fiduciary for the Unincorporated Federation of States, DBA, the United States of America. Notice to agents as notice to principals. Notice to principals as notice to agents. If you have any questions, call or write. Anna Maria Riesinger, fiduciary, the United States of America, in care of Box 520994. Big Lake, Alaska 99652.